So I got with me Nathan Walker, one of our great developer experts. So I want to first actually find out your story about how you got into development and also like how you got yourself into Angular. Can you tell us something?
This is a fun story. You know, I feel like I was stuck in a room with engineers who hated front-end development for several years. And I felt like when AngularJS first came out, it was a long fight to try to get AngularJS in. Everyone knew we needed something more interactive, so it was really about being interactive in the browser. And I think eventually once they saw what we could do with Angular, it became very easy to convince the boss and the rest of the team. But it was a long, hard fought battle to get AngularJS in. But yeah, so that's, it was Ruby on Rails, and we converted everything to AngularJS, and that's where I fell in love with Angular for sure. That was about 2 or 3 years of development on that product, and then we did want to go to the newest Angular. And we did start to develop that out, but the product really was actually at a stable point with Angular. So there wasn't a huge push to try to get everything converted because it was a pretty big app. So we decided to kind of let that stay on AngularJS. So as of today, it still stands on Angular 1.5. So after that, we kind of got into a couple other things, some other client projects. Now, mobile development, as far as iOS development, probably goes back maybe 10 years. There was definitely a startup in Portland where we did some mobile development and video conferencing type of apps, and we wanted to do something interactive on mobile, and we did a full-blown iOS app at that time. The problem was that we had done a lot of web development, and we wanted to use a lot of that, and at the time we couldn't reuse anything, and it was really a sore point with that project to not be able to kind of just use all this work that we've done for several years. So that has always been my desire to try to share some of that code because that project ended up getting sold to a company in the end. So I believe probably around 2011 maybe, when there was some push and some of those things about native scripts started to come out a bit. Early on, that I definitely was like immediately interested. So I think that's what got me initially interested, kind of the fact that you could share a lot of code with native apps.
That's pretty cool. And so you gave a talk with Jeff, like about like basically how to do the code sharing between like web, even desktop and mobile. Like, can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, so we introduced XPlat. This is an add-on for NX. So we love NX. When it came out in the fall, when Norwal first introduced it, this was really kind of a game changer for a large project that I was involved with at the time, Portable North Pole. And we were maintaining 3 different repos, and we knew we wanted to bring everything together, but we really didn't like a lot of the current solutions to do that. So when NX came out, it seemed like a perfect solution. We tried it, and it did work out wonderfully well. So the extensibility of it provides a lot of opportunities to do all sorts of things. So I think multi-platform development, it wasn't built for right out of the box. So we wanted to add something extra to that. And that's the idea behind XPlat. So XPlat is a way to bring in multi-platform development in an extensible way into an NX workspace, and we're really excited about where it can go.
Cool. And pretty much you can use anything that is what, like Angular, right? So like it could be Electron, can be NativeScript, just web.
That's right, and even Ionic. The generator that comes to create the structure, I plan to do an Ionic integration in the summer. So even folks who have Ionic projects could probably share some of that code, even with NativeScript apps if they needed to.
And so what sort of things can you share?
You can share everything from low-level data services, component properties and methods. Data flow is a big one. So there's a lot of data flow that can define the architecture of the app. And I'd say all of that is really critical to share because that's the meat of the app. If your data flow is nice and defined, the flow, you can consolidate that in one place, and then all your apps can share that and take advantage of those flows. So you get the stability because those flows are kind of locked in place once you have architected it out. and then your apps can just take advantage of that right away.
Cool. And then like, so what are like the key challenges that like you would usually hit when you do like code sharing?
One of the biggest things is probably just the view difference for sure. I think, especially on a team that is new to native app development, there's a lot of well-versed web developers, and I think the idea of NativeScript and bringing in a native layer is exciting to a lot of folks and maybe still a little new. So I think understanding the difference on a native platform is probably the biggest challenge you run into, just because you want to understand on a basic level what some of the fundamental differences are. Outside of that, it's probably intermixing platform-specific code. And that's, again, what we try to deliver with XPlat, is a place where you can go, where you know you can build out and do any platform-specific code in this location, in the code base that extends and takes advantage of all the other shared code. So, intermixing platform languages, definitely.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I also like found like tricky when you had like different APIs. Like, you know, you have a web API library and then mobile, and then they kind of like, those get very tricky, right?
Very tricky. Yeah, in the window, I'd say a lot of folks, when they start intermixing those, will start using a lot of the window APIs from the browser, which is totally natural. But there is no window object on native platforms, so you want to be careful to wrap that truly.
All right. Hello.
So yeah, I would say that's a big thing that you run into a lot, is where folks will use window kind of fluidly throughout and just assume that may work when it's run on a native platform, and of course it won't. So you want to create an Angular service around global DOM APIs like that.
Yeah, and I mean, and those are pretty easy mistakes to make, right? So
very easy.
So for anyone that is, let's say you have web developers and they want to get into mobile space, and let's say they stumbled upon NativeScript, what would be your advice for them to kind of get into it?
Generate an app and start making some changes and see what those changes reflect in the view. The Bootstrap app that NativeScript provides is a great starting base. It has routing set up, so you can start to see how the detail views navigate in. Start making some changes, add some components, refer to the NativeScript docs to look at all the components that are available, and try to install maybe some community plugins and play with those. And I think you'll start to understand pretty quickly that the view layer has a lot of similarities, and that it actually feels pretty natural as a web developer to approach.
And did you ever have to actually migrate like a web project into like NativeScript, or maybe Ionic project into NativeScript like before?
There was a project maybe 2 years ago, yes, where we did take a web-based project and we did convert it into NativeScript. I would say the majority of the code that we ended up rewriting was probably about 60% of that code. So some things you can take from an existing project are obviously utility methods, of course, can come over. Some component layer stuff and controller stuff, even if it's AngularJS, you can bring some controller stuff that may create structures around bindings. Those can drop right into components that you could bind directly to NativeScript. So those are, it's not too painful to do, really, just depending on how large the app is that you're converting.
Cool. And do you have like any, like over the last 12 months, any favorite feature that came out in Angular and then also for NativeScript?
That's a good question. You know, I love the new params that you can dive into deep param checks on the Angular router. It's kind of a new feature where if you're in like a 2-level deep route, you can grab the params from the route behind it. So before you would have had to track some route and bring in a snapshot to get those, but that's a really nice feature. Yeah. As far as NativeScript is concerned, definitely the improvements with the CLI, the stability, the improvements on debugging, for sure. The flattening of NativeScript UI, the Pro UI suite, that's been really nice.
Nice, cool. And do you have like any heroes like within the community?
So many heroes. Definitely Jeff Cross, Victor Savkin, Brad Green's huge inspiration. Definitely Alex Vakarlov, Stan Amira, amazing developer. Jen Looper, TJ. I would say in the Angular community specifically, Pete Bacon Darwin, from all the answers he did on the forums and community-based issues from years back with AngularJS. He just knew the answers to everything. Igor Minar, of course. Yeah, those are definitely big heroes for me.
That's pretty cool. And the last question? No, actually, yeah, I have two questions. So, what's your favorite 80s movie?
Favorite 80s movie is actually The Explorers. It's kind of a under the radar, a little bit movie, but there's probably some folks who have seen it. It's River Phoenix, and there's 3 kids in it. It's kind of more along the lines, it feels a little bit like Stand By Me, but these kids build a spaceship and they take it up and they encounter some aliens, and it's a fantastic 80s movie. I love it.
All right, I never heard of it.
The Explorers. Yeah, check it out.
And the last question is that the outfit in which you're coding?
This is what I code in every day. This is pretty much what I'm most comfortable in, and it pretty much lasts through the seasons.
I mean, yeah, it looks pretty comfortable. Yeah,
No,
pretty good. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.